Hey everybody, this is Sean from Low Code Approach. Thanks everybody for, all the amazing suggestions that we had all year and guests to talk to and just topics to cover. We had a blast with that. We can't wait to do more, and we need your help with more topics at aka.ms/low code topic request. We also need your help with ratings and reviews on whatever platform you use to get your podcasts. So please drop a rating, drop a like, and follow us on LinkedIn at the Low Code Approach LinkedIn group. Can't wait to see you there. Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Low Code Approach. I'm Sean Fiene, a Senior Product Marketing Manager on the Power Platform team. Now, usually here is where I pass the mic to my good friends Ken and Wendy. However, Ken and Wendy are working on a, not so secret project, so I'm going to spill the beans, but they're working on a smoke alarm that doesn't detect bacon smoke because it has interrupted us so many times. Thank you, Wendy. So we appreciate your advances in science. However, I'm joined by my other good friend.
It is I, your General of Security, Jocelyn from the Power Platform and Dataverse Security team. So for those of you guys who've been listening to us for a while, you may have heard me mention a different lifetime that I've worked here at Microsoft. And usually at that point in time, I'm referring to my stint working on Power Platform connectors. But if we dig way, way back, like 500 million years back when there were dinosaurs and Sean was in high school, I actually started off at a different team. So I'm really excited for this episode. The first team that I had the privilege of working for here was Power Automate. And with that, we are joined with the lovely partner PM director, Miss Christy Jefson. Christy, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I wonder now if I'm a dinosaur.
No. Only Sean is dinosaur.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the deep lore prequels, Jocelyn. That's fantastic. But let's talk a little bit about something that's newer, right? And so by that I mean generative AI and Copilot, right? And so that's everywhere. And Christy, we really are super appreciative of you joining the podcast because we want to talk about what does that mean in the world of Power Automate desktop, right? So there's integration with AI, Copilot, and the new capabilities that are brought here. And I think we got to make sure people know what's happening in the world of desktop flows and generative AI. So could you give us a primer on what does that actually mean?
So it's interesting because, we have over years thought about what does it mean to have AI in automation? And really the way that we think about it is in two ways. One is the how. How is it that you're making automations? And so how do we include AI in those sorts of scenarios? And then there's the what, right? So what is the automation? Oftentimes you might think of this, we call it like intelligent automations. A number of years ago, even before all of the movement towards LLMs, we have a product called AI Builder that was really, really core to automation. So we'd be able to include things like your pre-trained models or your custom models in an automation. One of the key ways that people use this is for like intelligent document processing, a very, very common automation scenario. Today now, as you know, like AI Builder has moved into the world of LLMs and now has AI prompts. So now that is sort of more the way that we see a lot of the automations going when we think about the intelligent automations, inclusion of these sorts of models within the automations that you're building. But I think a lot of the question that maybe you're thinking mostly about is like, how do we use it in the how? How do we leverage or think about AI in automation with how we're building automations? So how do we incorporate that into the tool set so that really it has unlocked great potential? Because so many people now can go, before maybe you needed to be like an automation specialist or an RPA developer trying to, figuring out how to actually do all of the scripting. But now, like, we have the ability to really unlock this for more and more people leveraging AI. So, these are some of the areas. And then I would just mention that outside of even this, another how is how do you manage the automations, right? So, we have so many customers with large automation estates. you have thousands of bots running on Power Automate, and how do you actually manage where the issues are, right? Like these are key business processes for people. And so leveraging LLMs and AI, we've been able to do things like make recommendations of here's something that's gone wrong, or here's something to keep an eye on, right? So it's really just helped us to provide customers with more value because now you can just pinpoint the things you need, reduce the amount of time that it takes, which, time is money for everybody. And so this really, really helps across the board. So these are just sort of how we're thinking about it, the how, the what and the how as far as introducing this.
It was a killer opener. You really just like laid out bullet points of everything that we want to talk about today. Do you do this often or something? I'm not sure. Let's dive into that how. So back 500 million years ago, which was actually just 2020, I got to work on this feature that was like revolutionary at that time, right? And it was, wait for it, the copy paste feature in Power Automate Desktop. So a couple months back, we're at PPCC. Awesome keynotes, right? Awesome keynotes. And one of the big things was AI Recorder. And I'm like, oh my God, that's like the new and improved big brother of what I had to work on many, many years ago. Tell me, how is AI Recorder the how?
Yeah, really good question. So AI Recorder, which is currently in preview. So, as I was mentioning, the challenge oftentimes is how do we make automation more approachable? And when we think about things like RPA development in particular, and sort of these key business processes, I think one of the things that, if you think about how RPA developers typically get the information to what they're going to be automating, is that they'll go and work with a business partner to understand the process itself, or, perhaps have some sort of documentation that explains the process all up. And so what we were thinking about is how can we sort of kill two birds with one stone, right? How can we help to expand the users who actually have access to building automations? But also, how can we help those RPA developers to get sort of a jump start on what they're doing without having to go out of their way to understand the process through other means? So what AI Recorder does, basically you're able to, using your voice and a screen share, like recording, I can explain the process step by step, walk you through it, just walk through one time. And what we'll do is we'll capture the video, we capture your voice instructions, and along the way, the metadata associated with what you've been interacting with. We take all of that information and we send it off to an LLM model. We then output from that is a plan. This plan is used then to send to another model, which is a model we have really tuned for Power Automate desktop scripting in particular. And so that plan gets sent off there. And what it does is it then provides us with an actual script. So just from, 30 seconds, a minute of recording, in just a few minutes, you now have your automation script. Now, are there some things that you may have to update or change? Certainly. Like, our goal wasn't originally to have a perfect script, but what it does provide is an incredible scaffolding for you to be able to go and finalize some of the details on. And also, like I was saying, from an RPA developer perspective, you now have the process, you have a starting script, which should make your job a lot more efficient, right? And so this was really our goals as we introduced AI Recorder, was to really bring it, to more people, to sort of break down those barriers, but also to really help the automation specialists. It's really an incredible feature.
That is awesome, but I'm gonna channel my inner Ken. With great power comes great responsibility. And you touched on it earlier where we talked about management, right? And so enterprises are utilizing these new technologies, and I know it's in preview, but how do we convince the admin? How does the admin not stay awake at night knowing that there's like really easy to utilize but extremely powerful tools like AI Recorder to automate these business processes. Can you speak to any guardrails we put in place to help admins feel better about this?
Overall, within Power Platform, we've got a robust set of capabilities really intended for such governance all up. And so AI Recorder is no different. In the world of Power Automate Desktop, this is something that we take very seriously because, as you know, these are very important processes, many of them to the organization. And so we want to be able to provide admins as much flexibility to be able to reduce things going into production if they don't want to, and also but allowing them to give open areas for the rest of their makers so that they do have the flexibility. One of the things that I think within Power Automate Desktop is that really in order to run the automation, you're typically going to run these in an unattended fashion, which means you're going to have machines associated with it. You have a lot of system guardrails, if you will, that are kind of just part and parcel of the world of RPA. So I think that in and of itself, but of course, you can turn on and off any Copilot features in general so that if that is something that makes you uneasy, certainly you don't have to provide this functionality. But overall, Power Platform just has such great functionality all up. We really give those options to all to manage their estate as they wish.
So you mentioned earlier in your mega intro that I love so much, something about recommendations or providing pointed guidance or really helping empower. And that's something that we talk about a lot in the admin management space, right? Being able to provide guidance on how you can be able to better govern, better secure. What do these recommendations and guidance look like for you?
Yeah, so I guess this really depends on the place within the product itself. So when I think about it in I think you were more alluding to the management space. If I think about the management space, a lot of the recommendations are things like check to see because there's been a number of failures in this particular flow. So maybe you want to see if there's something that's going wrong there. Maybe there's a machine problem. There could be any sort of thing that's happening with that. Two is, the introduction of ideas like SLA. It could be that you have work that needs to be done by a certain amount of time. You've set an SLA. How do you make sure that you don't surpass that? So if you're starting to encroach on that time, it's time to take action because maybe something's off track. There's also even recommendations that we're providing around your capacity utilization. So, you know, are you with the current setup that you have of machines and licenses, are you actually surpassing on a common basis? And maybe you need to think about extending your estate more. So these types of recommendations we have within management. We also have within Power Automate Desktop authoring itself what we call next best action, which is effectively a recommendation of what is the next action you should be building. So as I am building a script, you do like the plus sign to add a new action, it will recommend like this seems like the most common action that should be the next one. So really helps you to build your flow.
That is awesome, and I'm going to request a link to more Learn Doc on the recommended next action. That's really cool because I need my business process autocomplete. I really appreciate that. The one thing I want to talk a little bit about though is not just recommendations on like how to better manage it, but recommendations on processes that are primed for RPA. Like I'm a business user. I'm overwhelmed. I've got a gazillion processes. Obviously, there's tools out there that can help me, but I don't know what tool for what business process. How does RPA help me figure that out? Or how does Power Automate Desktop help me figure that out?
I think one thing that if you look at Power Automate all up, like Power Automate is comprised of multiple pieces, right? We have Power Automate Desktop, which you're referring to, which is sort of our RPA offering, if you will. We have Power Automate Cloud Flows, which is our cloud offering for automating against APIs. And then one of the things that we also have within our suite is process mining. And process mining, task mining, these are things that are really important to the world of automation. Historically, building automations could come in many forms. And I think one of the things that oftentimes, if you just start your automation journey, the first question is, what do I want to automate? How do I know what to automate, right?
Yep.
what is the greatest ROI for my company? So these are the sorts of questions people have. Now, you can go ahead and maybe hire a consultant and that's sort of how it was done in the past, where, walking through and figuring out how the process works, where do we have the biggest bottlenecks. But process mining has really brought in a much easier approach to this, where I can just take basically the logs of my systems of record and start funneling it through the process mining. And it concatenates it and actually brings together a view of a process map. And in that process map, let's imagine it's something like, I don't know, my invoice processing approvals process, or P2P, or some type of major business process. Right there on the process map, I'm able to follow it and see it goes by duration. It has all of these great attributes. So I can easily pinpoint, where are there areas within my business process that I need to do something about. So even within our process mining solution, we have recommendations, which I can use our Copilot within process mining, which will say, here, I recommend for this part, go create a Cloudflow, or I recommend a Power App for this, right? Like, I can get those types of recommendations out of our process mining. And one of the great things about it is, like, now I understand where I'm seeing in these processes what's taking the most time. I can easily go and automate that. Now, on the other side of within that space is something called task mining. Task mining is a little bit different than process mining in that it's not based off of consuming the system logs, but instead provides out a recorder. Power Automate Desktop has a recorder, historically, and that recorder you can use and actually walk through, much like the AI recorder. And if you have, say, all of us go and record our process, we can see where the commonalities are across the three of us. We may do it slightly differently, but our end is the same. The beginning might be the same. There's different parts of it that are the same. Those commonalities lend itself to automation as well. So this overall, I guess, to your question about recommendation of how do I get started or recommend what to automate, this is really one of the great things that we now have as part of our suite.
I love that. But I've been in the automation world for, and a terrible way to introduce this, but I've been in the automation world for like ever, since I was a dinosaur baby. But usually when you're introducing new technology, especially like automating tasks or automating a business process, you mentioned earlier, like, do I approach this by saying, like, what's the greatest ROI that I can bring to my company? We've made this investment and I want to prove that it's worth making this investment by saving money. But then, like, have I bitten off more than I can chew in what I'm trying to automate? And so now I get stuck trying to bring more efficiency to a business process, not fully understanding the entirety of the process and trying to learn a new technology. Do you think that the introduction of, AI recorder, task recorder, all these new technologies helping people automate their business processes is changing the way that you would go from, like, let me go to low hanging fruit and learn the product and build something that may provide benefit to me individually when I'm building out an automated task, or for the enterprise? How does that shift the narrative of training and bringing these new automation capabilities to an organization if you're just like rolling out Power Automate?
I think maybe your question is also, how do I actually, in some ways, democratize automation across my organization?
That is the best way to put it. Yes. In my long-winded way, I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding your question. So there's a lot of work that has been done across the organization here. One, how do we make automation more approachable? And I'll talk a little bit about that. But also, how do we provide sort of best practices for how to roll out and how to feel comfortable rolling out automation across your enterprise? We have an organization called PowerCat. And out of PowerCat, they have built a number of documents and best practices around how do you actually start doing things like training? How do you get people, doing hackathons internally? How do you get people really understanding this and working together? There's just been some incredible successes there across our large customers who now have been able to decentralize and get thousands of users in their organizations participating in automation. So it's just a fantastic thing. I've talked to so many customers, and one of the things they do want to not have like be a bottleneck as well in automation. Like, as much as if you feel comfortable getting people automating, and you've got the right guardrails in place, let's use the masses that we have. But to your question, and a part of that question is, how do you make it this more approachable? And this is where, let's imagine we have all of the governance and we've got the guardrails set up. I mentioned training, but right now we're in a really great place where you don't even need to train all that much. Because with the introduction of natural language and LLMs, we talked about sort of at the beginning the idea of how do you change the how. We've been able to introduce technology that by leveraging LLMs, we can use natural language to build things. This is the most natural thing for any human being, really, is I can just say what I need to do. And to your question about how do you sort of get that divide about, like, I know what my business process is, but I get stuck along the way. Well, guess what? If I'm the business process owner and I can start to say what I'm doing, I can start to build my automation. And so that is one of the great things that we've been, sort of coming as the automation in the age of AI, if you will, has really come about is, we're able to improve features or enhance them so that, and it's not just for like people who don't know how to automate, but it really helps. One of the things that we have now in Power Automate Desktop is the NL to Flow feature, or the natural language to desktop flow. And, if I go and I say, I want to create an automation where I take the attachment from my email and copy it to an Excel and then save it to SharePoint or something like that, I can just write that in, and now it's going to generate the script for me, which it's very magical, right? Like the combination. So we think of like how to create automations now between the describe it with Copilot and record it with Copilot. That's how we think, like the AI recorder and the natural language. They're very tightly coupled. And so now I get to where I have, like I said, the scaffolding of my flow is right there. But we've used actually natural language in a way in Power Automate Desktop in many other little areas as well that are things that people like. Imagine I may need to have something like, I just have one part of my script that needs like a Python snippet, right? I don't know, like, do I have to know every single coding approach, So we have something called natural language to script. So I can just say what I want the script to do, and it will create the code for me. So this has actually been one of like a really, really embraced feature, because it's just one of those things, like, if everybody has to go up online, look it up, remember how to do some of these things. So it's just like at a snap of a fingers, you've got it right there.
You're basically saving me time from going to Stack Overflow and copy pasting code from there. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
So I remember 2.5 years ago, when NL to Flow was the thing, man. I remember thinking like we were so big on templates, and now like, not saying templates aren't needed. They are still needed, but it's so different because you don't have to go and search for which one you're looking for. You just go and immediately describe the scenario that you want, and it happens. And it was a complete game changer. So looking ahead and visionarily, perhaps not a feature, but what is like a scenario that's our next big rock that we're looking to tackle? Like, what's the dream?
It's a really good question. I think if we think about RPA, I know we haven't really touched on some of the challenges of RPA, but one of the bigger challenges in RPA is the fact that UI automation, web automation can be very brittle. But the reality is much of our world is still not just using APIs. So how do we make it just so easy to automate against UI and web structures, but that I can keep it, I know that it's resilient, right? And so I think if we see like the future, we see what has been coming out recently in new models of having more screen understanding. The more as these sorts of models evolve, it really makes an incredible difference in the RPA space.
This has been awesome. I've learned a lot. I'm 100% positive our listeners have learned a lot on this, and I am going to be pinging you for links to a lot of the great features and any blog posts that can help our listeners learn more. So question, you mentioned some things are in preview. How do I get started? Like, where do I go to start incorporating some of these great new features into my organization?
Yeah, so just go to powerautomate.com, log in. Our preview features are available right there. Right now in preview, we have our Copilot that we were talking about, our natural language flow that includes things like the Q&A, summarization, and things like that. AI Recorder is in preview. Self-healing is in preview, which we didn't talk about, but it recommends and actually changes if your UI breaks. Great feature to try out. But we also have some of our fan favorites. Dark mode is in preview, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is really, like, I know it seems funny because we talk about all of like AI and in Power Automate and all of this, but dark mode was one of those that was just like, we must have. So dark mode is there right now. We do release Power Automate desktop releases every month. We publish release notes. We publish a blog every month. So if you go to the Power Automate blog, you can see what has come out every month. And yeah, I would love for people to please try out all of our features, give us feedback. It's the way that we can make the best products.
Real quick, just to follow up, what's the best way to give feedback on those features?
Yeah, so we have ideas for them. So certainly people can provide through that. We also, in many of the features, have thumbs up, thumbs down. We have surveys that go out. Certainly reach out to anybody or any way that you see to give feedback.
That is so cool. Look, you mentioned self-healing UI, and that means that we are going to ask you to come back to talk a little bit more about that and all the other great advancements that are coming to Power Automate desktop and flows and just everything. It's such a great topic, and I think that people will really unlock the value of what Power Automate brings the more they kind of analyze their business processes and see what applies, right? And which is a lot. There's a ton you can do. Christy, thank you so much. We're going to have a whole bunch of show notes and can't wait to hear from people. And we're going to bring a whole bunch more questions to you for the next interview.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.